Hey, David Brewster here with a new episode of Soloing Secrets, and this is Freddie King, and I've had some requests to feature Freddie King, and this actually concludes this look at the three Kings. I did start this with Albert King, followed that with B.B. King, and now we're hitting Freddie King. And honestly, I posted this on Facebook not too long ago. I absolutely love Freddie King. No offense to Albert and B.B., I love them too. But I really, really love Freddie King, his music, his vocals, his guitar playing, the whole package. You know, a legendary guitarist. And his career started around 1952, and in his lifetime he released 13 studio albums, 11 compilations, and 9 singles. And 4 of those singles actually were top 10 hits on the R&B charts. And unfortunately, Freddie passed away in 1976. So he was the youngest of the three Kings, and he lived the shortest, lifespan. And he didn't have the big 80s or 90s, revivals that Albert and B.B. had. So definitely, if Freddie King would have lived, I think he would have recorded with Stevie Ray Vaughan, much like Stevie did with Albert King. And there's a lot of things I think Freddie would have accomplished and done in his life had he had lived, a little bit longer. But anyway, if you're a Freddie King fan or a blues guitar fan, this lesson's totally for you. Just like we've done in other episodes in the Soloing Secrets series, when you're checking out a certain guitarist or band, it's always a good idea to scope out their influences, which will reveal certain things that pop up in their music, playing habits and little quirky, areas that pop up in their music or guitar solos or licks. And with Freddie, it's interesting, it's a lot of early blues. And then notice on this chart I'm getting ready to share that B.B. King is mentioned there. B.B. was definitely a huge influence on Freddie. You gotta think, I think Albert King was 11 years older than Freddie, and B.B. was 9 years older. So definitely Freddie was kind of the puppy of the blues, back in the day. But anyway, here's a list of some of Freddie King's influences. So like I mentioned a few moments ago, Freddie's life was cut short. He died in 1976. He was in his 40s, when he passed away. So he didn't have the big extended career that Albert and B.B. had. But he did work with some very essential and very important blues musicians and session musicians, on his albums and on stage too. But here's an image with some of the people that Freddie King worked with, in his lifetime. As far as Freddie King's soloing secrets, the things he typically liked to do when he'd pick up a guitar and play a fill or a lick or a solo, and there's a lot of blues influences, minor and major pentatonic scales, hybrid pentatonics, blues, minor blues scale, lots of emotive, bending and vibrato. But one of the really interesting things about Freddie's style was the way he picked. He didn't use a traditional plectrum or a pick. He actually used a plastic thumb pick and a metal finger pick on his index finger. And if you were really watching, during the opening jam, I didn't actually use the thumb pick. I was just really picking with this finger pick. And this is the first time I've ever actually tried to channel Freddie King and pick and play the way he used to play. So he really was doing something like this, but primarily it was the index finger, a lot of upstrokes, heavily accented. And I watched a couple concerts with Freddie, and I noticed his hand was like this when he played, and his thumb kind of hung out over here, and occasionally he would thump on some, bass notes or root notes. I did catch him doing a turnaround at one point, and he moved into open position and was thumping with that thumb, with the thumb pick. But most of the time when he played, solos and licks and bending and stuff, it was index finger upstrokes, heavily accented. And this is really interesting to kind of tap into Freddie's world. Now, honestly, I'm not going to use the thumb pick. I'm primarily just going to kind of adapt his, metal finger pick to my playing. and try to channel, some of his musical, ideas and energy. So anyway, just a heads up on Freddie's unique picking style, thumb and finger pick. So the music and ideas in this episode actually came from 3 Freddie King related albums, and like I mentioned during the beginning, he released 13 albums in his lifetime, so that's a lot of music to dig through. But I really just kind of targeted my favorite era of Freddie's career, and that's the 70s. No offense to the 50s and 60s, Hideaway and all that stuff, that's great stuff too. But I really like when he started working with Leon Russell, and the 60s kind of paved their way into the 70s. And some of those albums and some of that music that Freddie was making was just glorious. I love that stuff. So we're going to hit some of my favorite, moments. We're going to look at some signature licks and definitely get a feel for using this metal finger pick, on your index finger. So here we go. With the opening jam, that was Palace of the King from Getting Ready, and that's a great song. Last song on the album, kind of hidden. And you'll hear a rhythm guitar track. I was looping this with the MXR clone looper, but you'll hear a rhythm guitar doing this. And it just keeps thumping that, for a while. That C sharp to E back and forth. And then just an E minor 7 right there, slid off. And then do that back and forth, C sharp to E. And then just the low E open, like that. So that's the rhythm part. There is a change a little bit later, but you got that rhythm part kind of thumping, and then you hear Freddie come in like this. So let's break that down. So he's doing basically B to D, and then he bends that D to E, and then catch that fretted E right there on the 12th fret, high E, like that. And then you're going to do so right there you're going to do that B to D, and then bend that D to E, and then play a fretted E. And then you're going to do, so you're going to basically bend that D up twice, the second time add vibrato. And then right here, something like that. And it's really interesting to catch notes with a heavy upstroke like that. I'm still kind of getting used to it. I've been playing this way for a couple days now, just kind of getting a feel for it. And it still kind of messes me up because I'm used to doing heavy downstrokes sometimes. But Freddie was doing upstrokes a lot. Something like that. So all upstrokes there, and then right there, and I really like that where he's playing off the G string, and then he ends up grabbing that high E way up there like that, and then I like moving between that E and that D, and then he ends on G. That's really cool. Something like that. And then basically you hear him smear bend a G during the verse. And then you hear so right there he's doing this kind of a typical, bending lick, but you're doing all upstrokes with that that finger pick. Those upstrokes are weird. And then so you're doing this, and then this little crammed. That's definitely kind of a signature Freddie King lick right there. And then the next lick, like you're hearing the verse right here, and you're going back to this. And eventually you hear this lick. And he kind of does that same cram lick there at the end, but he's doing. And And then this is where you hear the change right there. So all that is like this. So right there's where it changes, right? So it's going to move to E5, and then it's an E over G sharp, to A, to C, and then you hear it move back to E, to a B, and then you hear it thump E, you know, like that. So during that change, when it goes to that E and that E over G sharp, A to C, you're basically doing this. Just a second here. You know, something like that. So when that change came in, you hear him do this. Definitely a signature lick there from Freddie. And then you hear there's kind of a pause right there, and then you hear this. And then you kind of waiting right there, and then you got this kind of short solo. And then right there, and he kind of put that cram lick again at the end of that phrase right there too. And that's one thing I'll notice about Freddie's style is he'll set up like a little rhythmic, you know, kind of lick or a motif, and then he'll repeat it. It'll appear multiple times, you know, in the same song. Really cool, and check that song out. That's a great Freddie King song. Next up's the song Pack It Up. This came from Freddie's album Burglar. Definitely Burglar is a great Freddie King album. Check that one out. And it has this funky kind of rhythm part. And then you hear Freddie come in like this. You know, something like that. Kind of short and sweet in this intro solo here, but he's doing this. Definitely kind of a signature Freddie King lick right there. All upstroke, kind of accented. And then like that. So grab that, you know, then basically grab that E flat and bend that up to F. And then kind of a smeared bend and release. Like that. And definitely in the song, Pack It Up, you're going to hear Freddie do this fill a lot. He actually does it like a dozen times. Like that. Where he bends, you know, this B flat up a whole step to C, and then comes down like that kind of quick, you know, pull off. And listen to the tune, and you're going to hear that lick or that fill repeated multiple times. You know, something like that. And then eventually when the solo comes in, because you got all that. And then the song continues for a while, you know, verses are happening and everything, but eventually if you get up to the solo, you're going to hear him do this. You know, or something like that. So this is definitely typical of Freddie, and if you really watch him play like live concert footage and stuff, you're going to notice that he really plays a lot in these higher positions. It's really rare to ever see him down here. Freddie's always checking out, you know, this area, depending on what key is in. I think there was a concert review I read somewhere, and it said that the entire concert he didn't play below the 8th fret, which would be the key of C. But really interesting that he was definitely a high position guitarist. So right there, he's grabbing, you know, this really high B flat way up there, like that. And then you hear this, and then you hear these like big bends. So he definitely liked doing that, where he'd hang on those bends, you know, doing stuff like that. So definitely check out Pack It Up. There's some great licks in there and phrasing and stuff, and you can definitely hear that kind of chiming, you know, metal finger pick on Freddie's finger. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at some licks and ideas from Lowdown and Lodi, and this came from Freddie's album Texas Cannonball, which is on the wall up there. Definitely a legendary Freddie King album. And this has that Leon Russell, you know, kind of piano groove happening. It's a blues in D, and initially you hear Freddie do this series of different fills. In the first fill, he's doing like that. Just think D minor pentatonic right there, you know, that F, G, F, and then a pull off, that D to C. But those heavily accented, you know, upstrokes. Like that. And eventually, you know, the verse continues, and you hear this kind of accented phrase that's targeted over the 5 chord, which is A, and he's doing... Just imagine that last note's played over A7, right there. And then you hear some more fills. You're hearing, he actually does that one twice. And then he does that fill we did earlier. And then eventually you hear this fill. And that actually sets up right before the guitar solo with this. And then at the start of that guitar solo, there's some really cool stuff. One more time on that last little fill there. And then right at the beginning of the lead, you hear right there. So right there, think D minor pentatonic, minor to major third. You're also grabbing the 6th, that B note. Grab this, you know, after you grab that D up there, you're going to grab this C and shift slide that into D. You know, kind of a standard blues lick, but there's Freddie doing it right there. And definitely think of the influence, you know, some of these licks and ideas had. And then right there, you're doing... He's definitely kind of milking those notes up there. So it's, you know, basically played out of the box above the pentatonic box right there. You know, think of the standard box. And we're playing around up there. So he's doing that. You know, and all that kind of stuff. Definitely very expressive, very dynamic too. And a big part of those dynamics are coming from those, you know, heavily accented upstrokes using that metal pick once again. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Soloing Secrets. Let's look at Freddie King. Definitely a legendary guitarist and one of my favorite players for sure. I just love Freddie King. When I hear one of his songs come on, I just crank it up. And that's another thing too. You don't really hear his music. You hear BB and Albert way more than you ever hear Freddie, unless it's I'm Going Down. You know, thanks to Eastbound and Down. You know, that one did kind of have a resurgence in popularity in recent years. But definitely go back and listen to some of Freddie's albums and his music, his solos. And this approach using the metal finger pick. You know, this is the first time I've ever tried to do this. So I did have kind of an obstacle, you know, putting this together and playing some of these licks. Because I've never played this way before. But I like doing that when somebody's doing something a little bit different, or they're using a different technique or picking style, or you know, whether it's hybrid picking or finger picking or weird, you know, metal picks like this or whatever. But I kind of like, you know, challenging myself, like, hey, can I play that like the, you know, the way that they originally played it? And with these metal picks, you know, I was kind of surprised. The thumb pick in that little, you know, bag or that pack, that thumb pick is really cool. I doubt that I'll ever actually use it, but the thumb pick they included with that little bag of picks is really cool. It looks super fancy and it's etched or whatever. I'll probably just keep it, you know, like in my stash of crap here in my studio. But when I pulled that out, I was like, whoa, that's like a major league serious thumb pick. Anyway, just nerding out over these picks. But definitely, Freddie King, legendary. I highly recommend. Everybody should go and listen to some Freddie King. And you'll find something. You know, maybe it's a solo or a song or a whole album or whatever. But check out the 70s stuff and then start going back in time and listen to him in the 60s and the 50s and stuff. Great music. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Net Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.